The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether or not your decision is appropriate for you. Property Investing Matters is brought to you by Destiny, empowering investors to achieve success through property investment for more than 24 years.
Hello and welcome to Property Investing Matters. It's good to see you back here on the My Property TV web channel to enjoy another week of great investor education. I'm guessing that you're wondering whether now is the time to either buy or sell in the Sydney market. And so to answer that question and also give us a heads up on what's really happening on the ground, I've asked Tony Abboud from Snowden Parks Real Estate to join me to answer your questions. You can get those questions to me either by sending them to pim@mypropertytv.com.au at any time during the week, by posting them into a comment on my Facebook post, or by sending a direct message to me. Now, if you do that for this show or any show in the coming 2 weeks, you'll win for yourself 2 tickets to my webinar on September 30, where I'll not only be summing up the situation for property Australia-wide, but also releasing my 2020 areas to watch. For now, though, let's get started and let's welcome Tony to the show. Hi, Tony. How are you doing?
Good, Margaret. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, Tony, let's talk generally at first about the Sydney market. What are you seeing happening on the ground?
Well, Margaret, we're finding the Sydney market at the moment is quite balanced. As you know, when this COVID situation hit in March and in April, we found turnovers substantially slowed down, but the prices didn't crash like everyone was expecting the prices to go down. So what we're finding now is we're finding a lot of good sales and surprisingly at decent prices. As we've said previously, Sydney is a fairly large market. It's made up of 11 different market sectors. And we've said that at any one point in time, 2 or 3 sectors can be doing very well while other sectors in the market could be quite slow. Likewise, houses could be doing a lot better than apartments in a particular area. And we're finding at the moment the houses are very good. Apartments are a little bit slower because of the excess supply. And there are some areas with the off the plan that are quite struggling a fair bit, and that's simply because of oversupply.
Tony, a lot of experts before we really got right into the COVID situation, when it first hit, they were predicting 40% falls and 30% falls. You know, you get tired of them after a while because they come out every time there's a slight change in the environment. We're not seeing that. And when you talk about a balanced market, I'm assuming that you mean that there are less listings coming on, so people have just decided to hold off and not sell. And there are less buyers, so people have decided to hold off and not buy. And therefore, we're not getting a stress on either side, but not enough to make it fall. It's not like there's a whole lot of buyers and no sellers, or a whole lot of sellers and no buyers.
Absolutely. The thing that did underpin the market was the lack of stock. There was always a constant stream of buyers. There wasn't an excess number of buyers, but there was a constant stream of buyers. But one of the things that underpinned the market was the fact that there wasn't a lot of stock coming on the market. Can I make a comment about this so-called crash? What a lot of people don't accept is that if you go backwards, the market peaked in around July 2017. And between 2017 through till about mid-2019, that's when the market actually went down. We were actually on the way back up until COVID hit around February of this year. So the crash that everyone was predicting, or the price drops that everyone was predicting, actually happened between July 2017 and mid-2019. And we were in fact on the way back up.
Look, it's a very interesting situation because it's almost like most things in our life have gone on to a bit of a pause. I think anyone who had decisions made to expand businesses have stopped that. Anyone who are going on holidays obviously have had to stop that. I think the only thing that's changed is people are renovating their homes because they're in them more often. But would you say that now is then a good time to be buying in the Sydney market?
I always say this to people. If COVID wasn't with us at the moment, what are your plans? If there wasn't any COVID, would you be selling today or would you be buying today? And if the answer is yes, if it wasn't for COVID, I'd be selling, or if it wasn't for COVID, yes, I'd be buying, that's what you should focus on. It's not about COVID as such. We've always been taught never make a long-term decision based on a short-term situation. And we have to accept and we have to acknowledge that some people have suffered as a result of COVID, but it's not the trigger to make a long-term decision, or it shouldn't be the basis of making a long-term decision. Unless, of course, as you mentioned, people are now changed their lifestyle. There's now working from home dynamics that may affect what you buy or where you buy. But my belief is that if COVID wasn't here, what would you do? That's the critical question.
Yeah, look, you certainly make some very good points there. Tony, we've got quite a lot of emails to get through tonight, so I'd really like to get started on those if we can.
Sure.
And the first one tonight is from Tom, and Tom's question is, "Hi Margaret, always enjoy your show content and the advice that you give. Just wanted to get your thoughts about the current situation investing borderless in light of the extended closure of state and national borders. I'm located in Sydney and wonder whether these closures will deter interstate property investment and instead make investing in New South Wales regional areas more viable." Certainly an interesting prospect, Tony. I know that in terms of investing interstate, then the particular areas that are still showing potential to become hotspots are still showing them. But will they have fewer buyers in them because they'll only have local buyers rather than interstate buyers?
Well, again, I think that's a short-term situation. When we go back to what everyone's referring as to the new normal, those dynamics will come back into play. But I think it's very important to identify an emerging pattern. The regional areas just outside the major cities are experiencing a bit of a boom or upturn because now the new dynamic of working from home, we're finding a lot of people are quite happy to locate outside of the core cities, work from home and then come into town if and when they need to. Like we have an example of a lawyer. She lives in Orange. And she was always working in the city, and she used to go home every Friday night and come back on Monday morning to her apartment in the city and work. Now it's flipped. She works from home in Orange and only comes to the city 1 or 2 days a week. That trend is emerging quite substantially because of the ability to work from home. But there's also a social dynamic to that, and that is people feel it's safer living in the regions rather than in the dense city areas. So there's a social dynamic that's a trigger behind this movement into the regionals. So the short answer is the regionals are becoming more and more popular as a result of this COVID situation.
Yeah, look, Tony, you do make some really good points there, because I know where I am on the Central Coast and we have 0 cases of COVID, and we definitely feel safer even getting out and about to the shops here. And I know when I go down into Sydney, I do so with some trepidation, and I worry that I'm going to be exposed, through no fault of my own, to the virus. And whether a lot of that is about the media sensationalising things, it doesn't matter what's caused it, whether it's an accurate feeling or not. It's a fact just because it's human nature and it's how you feel. In terms of borderless investing, true borderless investors know they don't need to visit a property to buy it. So if you're suggesting that you can't get to another state to have a look at a property, then a true borderless investor knows that they don't need to do that. However,
Yes.
having said that, a lot of people still like to do it, and it could be a fact that people do just start buying in their own states. I think there's a lot of reasons to like the regions at the moment, and I do believe, as Tony has pointed out, that as people get more and more used to working from home, it's going to become their choice. And I think we've seen things change forever. And it's something I predicted would happen, but I thought it would be a long way off yet. I thought over the next 20 years we would slowly become more of a work from home country, but I think it's been brought forward by COVID, and even if they find a vaccination for it, then it's likely to be the next virus and the next virus and the next virus that keeps us all a little bit hyper-vigilant for quite some time. There's nothing wrong with investing in the regions. There's plenty of data to show that regions have performed very well over 20-year periods and have actually delivered easily as much as a city has delivered. There's plenty of regions that have done that. So just be careful when you talk about should we invest in the regions and referring to them as them being second choice. Very often they perform just as well, and they're certainly not second choice at all. Let's have a look at our next question for this evening's show, and it's from R. And R says, "Dear Margaret, we had a tenant who broke the lease by 2 months without payment for the outstanding rent. We'd like to know if there is any decision made by the government in regard to tenant not paying any rent for the outstanding 2 months, as it would normally apply to a broken lease. We had an out-of-court phone conference, but we didn't get anywhere. The tenant is of the opinion that because of COVID, he's willing to pay only half of the rent. Any thoughts? Thank you." Tony, it's important to point out that out-of-court phone calls are designed to get you to settle, not to decide
Yes.
whether it's right or wrong. It's designed to keep you out of the court system. If that case goes to court, a decision's made according to whatever the laws and rules are at the time. But those out-of-court telephone calls really mean very little if you come out of it not having settled, because you don't get any indication at all whether you're in the right, whether the tenant's in the right. You're not given that kind of guidance. They just want you to settle up and go, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
So what's the situation here?
Well, what we've been doing for the last 6 months, there are some people who are suffering hardship as a result of COVID. The flip side is that there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who are using COVID as an excuse to not pay rent or to get a rent reduction. We've put together a platform where we ask several questions. Firstly, the tenant needs to demonstrate a definite impact as a result of COVID. That's the first thing. And they need to give us evidence for us to be able to make a good decision. The second thing we look at, we ask ourselves a question, if this property was vacant today, what would we lease it for? And how does that compare with the current rent that the tenant's paying or the rent that they're asking to pay? That's the second question we ask. And then the third question we ask is, we have to take into account the landlord and their circumstances. Have they in fact been impacted by COVID? Now, when we look at those three scenarios, we then make a decision that's fair to all concerned. But a tenant can't just come along and say, I've decided to pay half the rent, take it or leave it. I don't think that's fair and equitable, and I don't think that takes into account the big picture.
Mm. And Trish, as far as I can tell from everything I've read, the fact that they've broken the lease is not against the rules or the new COVID rules, but that doesn't mean that they can also not pay rent. So if they were owing you rent up until the day they break their lease, then that rent is still due and payable. The new rules are that they can't be evicted from a property and that they can break a lease without penalty, but it doesn't say anything about them not paying rent that you owe to them. So as far as I'm concerned, you do have a case. It's a case that would probably need to go to the courts, however. But if you're up for it, it doesn't usually cost much to make those applications to the court. It's just your time. And if it's a significant amount of money, then it's probably worth you giving it a go. If the person genuinely has no money, though, it would be good if you could understand their situation. Then even if you had a court order, it's not going to get the money out of the person. So do make sure that you are aware of whether or not they still have a job and the capacity to repay you, because once you get to court, if you are found to be in the right, it's likely that a payment plan will be applied to that tenant and they'll pay you off over time. But if they don't have a job, then you're not going to get very far with that. Okay, our next question is from Trish, and Trish says, "Hi Margaret, my property manager has sold my business to a new company and I've been asked to sign a new management agreement. This new agreement has a lot more charges than the one I'm on, which is still current. Can they make me sign the new one?" So this often happens, Tony, where property management could be sold from business to business, where a franchise has changed. The management agreement that you are on, even if it's current, is in the name of the old business and you'll be presented with a new one. What kind of rights do you have?
Well, the first thing, the short answer to the question is no. They can't make you sign the new agreement and they can't ask you to pay more charges and expect you to say yes. When a business sells their property management business to another agency and they ask you to sign a new management agency agreement, the normal protocol is that the new agreement should be identical to the old agreement. The only difference is the agency that's on that agreement. If the new agency wants to negotiate something new, well, then obviously you should sit down with them and ask them to justify the extra charges or the new charges and whether that's of value to you or not. But they can't just expect you to sign a new agreement and up your charges simply because they've sold the business.
Yes, it's good to know, Trish, that you have some rights there, so you need to stick to them and say that you're not going to do that. And look, it could even be time for you to have a little shop around and see whether or not there's another property manager who suits your purposes a little more. Well, if you have a question of your own, get it over to me. And when we answer it on the show, you'll win 2 tickets to my upcoming webinar. It's called Investing in a Post-Pandemic Market. And it will not only explore what we might expect from property going forward, but we'll release a few of my 2020 areas to watch. To be in the running, email me your question to pim@mypropertytv.com.au or post it into a comment on any of my Facebook posts or also on the My Property TV Facebook page. We have a lot to cover here on Property Investing Matters tonight, but we are off for a short 1-minute break. So please do stay with us and we'll be right back soon with more of the show.
Setting and forgetting your property portfolio can be just as bad as never getting started at all. If you're not staying on top of interest rates, loan structures, tax deductions and current rent returns, there's a good chance that your portfolio is underperforming and you're losing money. Whether you have a large property portfolio or you're just starting out, monitoring your properties is just as important as buying them in the first place. Destiny's Finance and Portfolio Monitoring Service will not only oversee your rentals to ensure they're always achieving the best possible return, it will identify when you're ready to invest again and ensure that you always have the best and most cost-effective loan products available. And with more than 25 years of experience and billions of dollars in finance applications completed, you can be sure you're in safe hands with the experts in the business, Destiny.
Go to destiny.com.au to find out more, or give us a call on 1300 My Destiny.
Thanks for staying with us. Our real estate expert, Tony Abboud from Snowden Parks Real Estate, is here tonight and he's answering your questions. And we're also talking Sydney real estate and giving you some information on whether now is the time to buy or sell in the Sydney market. If you have a question, get it to me on pim@mypropertytv.com.au or pop it straight into a comment on my Facebook page. You can do that anytime through the week, or you can even send me a direct message through Messenger. Let's get back to our discussion now with Tony. Tony, we talked about whether you should be buying in Sydney. If you were a seller at the moment, but you didn't have any dire need to sell, do you think you'd be waiting for a little while?
The reason most sellers wait is because of an expectation of a higher price. Where we've said earlier that we don't believe the market's going to crash, but in the short term, we also don't believe it's going to take off exponentially. So what a lot of sellers are finding now, we're in that flat space of the market. Like we said earlier, the market's balanced at the moment. So in a lot of cases, whether you sell today or whether you sell in 3 or 4 months' time, the likelihood is you're going to get a similar price. So the decision as to whether you sell now or later is not really at the moment determined about what price you might potentially get. It's more about your own personal circumstances, where you're going to, have you got somewhere to buy, have you bought? So it's more about you rather than about price, because traditionally people who want to play the market, they tend to say, well, if we wait, will we get more? The short answer to that at the moment is an expectation that we're in that flat space of the market where whether you sell today or whether you sell in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, the price is likely to be fairly similar. Past that, no one can tell, but we expect that past that short-term phase, which could be anything from 6 to 12 months, and I know when I say short-term and then I say 6 to 12 months, people go, well, that's not really short-term, but it is. Past that period, my personal expectation is that the market will continue where it left off before February of this year and start going back up again.
Tony, earlier in the show you talked about there being 11 different markets in Sydney. Can you give us a little bit of a heads up on which ones are performing better at the moment and which ones we should be staying away from?
Well, if we divide the market into sort of the top end, the middle market and the bottom end of the market is doing very well at the moment. And for Sydney, that we're talking sort of $600,000 or sub $600,000 prices. That bottom end of the market is doing very well because of affordability factor, because there's a lot of government incentives supporting that, and that's doing really well. The top end of the market, the prestige end, we're still seeing some quite substantial sales in that top end of the market. So that's quite a unique marketplace. The real question is, what about the middle market? Now, the middle market is determined by geographic areas. Like the inner west areas close to the CBD are doing very, very well. You go to any of these open houses or auctions and they're all selling. They're doing very well and they're getting some very, very good prices. Some of the areas where there's not a lot of good infrastructure or infrastructure is due to come in, those areas are a little bit flat. So, for example, some people are saying the Parramatta area is going to get oversupplied with apartments. I know if we go out towards Rouse Hill, there's a massive, I think there's 1,700 apartments due to settle out there. So that area is a bit of a worry in terms of the oversupply. If you go out in towards where the new airport is being built, you go to Schofields, Marsden Park, those areas are absolutely booming. and they're being underpinned by a lot of investment from government and a lot of transport infrastructure, employment opportunities. So those areas are well and truly booming. Interestingly, the Northern Beaches areas have been doing very well. Northern Beaches of Sydney, they've been doing very well over the last few months. And the Balmain, the Leicards, the Marrickvilles, they've been doing really well. The prices in those areas have actually come up a little bit in the last 6 months. So it really comes down to supply and demand and infrastructure when you're determining whether an area is doing well or not doing well.
So Tony, that seems to me to leave areas like the Sutherland Shire and some of southwest Sydney that sounds to me like it's probably not faring as well.
That's correct. That's correct. And again, it's a bit of a supply situation, and it's very much an infrastructure scenario. Like areas like Cronulla are not doing as well as what we would have expected normally. And I think it's because if you drive through that area, you see a lot of for sale signs.
So more supply in areas like that at the moment.
Yeah.
Tony, lots more questions. Let's start up with the next three. This one comes from Brad, and Brad says, "Hi Tony and Margaret. I have found that the management fee is so different from state to state. I recently received a new management agreement with my current manager in Perth, and the fee is 13.25% plus GST. In addition, they're charging me for every inspection a 2-week rent lease fee, and basically every action has a charge. Surely there's something I can do about this. I've looked around, but everyone is the same. It's a big chunk of my income." That is a big chunk, Tony. I know that I've got some states where I'm paying 7.5%. and I don't pay for any inspections, but they do seem to really want to gouge you over there in Perth.
That is massive. That is so expensive. You've got to understand the fees over the years have actually been progressively coming backwards or coming down. And the reason for that is as rents go up, the fees have to progressively go down because it's like bracket creep, if you know what I mean. So if you've got a rent at $350 a week and you used to pay 7.5% management fee, if that rent now is $650 or $750 a week, your management fee should have come down to about 5% because it's that bracket creep that, as the rents go up. But I'd be interested to know what the rent figures are in Perth for the agents to be charging 13.5% plus on costs. The rents must be very, very low.
They are fairly low. Brad, you know what? I hear your pain and feel your pain, and I'm in a very, very similar situation myself. I've got property, as you know, all over the country, and I do have 2 in Perth. And I've recently also received, probably from the same property manager, an agreement. I think one was for 13% with a couple of things included in that, but still not the inspection fees. And one was for 10% plus GST with nothing included, and really high charges for things like a quarterly inspection was like $120 each. And if you added all of that up, it comes to about 15% of my rent, which is a big chunk for me off that rent. And I really had to think about what I was going to do. Now, I've successfully used in South Australia a property manager who has a flat fee, and for him it's a set price for every property on a monthly basis, which is all inclusive. And it depends on how much rent you're getting. If you're getting really super low rent, it's a reasonably high fee. But if you're getting anything from mid-range to upper range rent, it works out really cheaply. So I went looking for the same thing in Perth, and I did find 2 property managers there who are offering this flat fee rental. And I'd be happy to share those with you if you wanted to write to me about that, and if anyone wants to write to me about that. I'm trying one of them out, so I can't tell you yet whether they're going to be any good, but they're 10% Still a lot, I know, but 10% GST inclusive, but I don't pay anything else except a 1 week lease fee. So it seems to be a lot better to me, relatively speaking. I mean, if anyone had said to me, you're going to pay 10% for management, I would have been shocked because it's way more than I'm going to pay anywhere else. But in light of the 13% one, it's not a bad rate for Perth. I don't know what's going on over there, why they think they need to charge so much or why they're so disconnected from the rest of the country, but it is what it is. Let's go to our next question. It's from Claire. Claire says, hi Tony, can I negotiate on the fee that a selling agent wants to charge me? I'm wanting to sell my house on the Central Coast and the fees seem to be much higher these days. Also, they want me to pay for advertising and marketing up front. In the old days, that was included. What options do I have? Oh, Tony, the good old days when real estate agents seemed to be more straight up, when it was less confusing and where they got paid if they sold your house, but if they didn't, it was their risk.
That's right. And many, many years ago, fees were regulated. But once fees became deregulated, then there were different fees being charged by different agents. The short answer to the question is, of course, you can negotiate the fees. It's really up to the agent to be able to sell their fees to you. They've got to demonstrate value. More importantly, they've got to demonstrate the ability to negotiate on your behalf, because the true value that an agent brings to a client is their ability not only to find the right buyer, but to negotiate the best price. And a good agent normally will negotiate a price well above any fee that you pay them. So through their negotiation skills, any fee that you pay the agent, they would have managed to get that out of the buyer. Now, the flip side to that, and it's very important that we acknowledge this, when we're negotiating with buyers, we're not trying to rip buyers off. We're not trying to get more than they're able to pay. The critical thing is when you're negotiating with a buyer, an agent's job to the seller, their obligation to the seller, is to get the most that the buyer is able to pay and they're prepared to pay. If an agent is able to do those two things, the most that a buyer is prepared to pay and able to pay, then they've truly negotiated the highest price on behalf of the seller. Now, if they can do those two things, then they justify whatever fee they charge you.
Tony, what do you think about the new practice of charging you $3,000 and $4,000 as an upfront marketing fee in a way to defray the risk off the agent and put it back onto the seller?
Well, the first thing I would say is that an agent should have some buyers on their books. An agent who says to you, give me some money so I can go and find a buyer, the very first question I would ask that agent is, how long have you been in the business? Surely you must have some buyers on your books that are looking for properties to buy that haven't found the right property yet. So an agent who is purporting to be as if it's their first day in business and wants you to pay to go and find some buyers for that agent to negotiate with, I'd be a little bit on guard. You should never have to pay for advertising with an agent that's well established and has a whole sort of catalogue of buyers on their books from all different price categories and all different types of properties. Now, an agent should be an attractor to buyers through their activity in the community, in the marketplace. So initially, absolutely not. There's no need to pay any advertising monies up front to go and find a buyer if you're dealing with an agent that's well and truly established in that area.
I always find it interesting, Tony, seeing some of these ads or the big billboards that go up out the front of a property, and it's got a massive big picture of the agent's face and their telephone number, and then for sale written, and then nothing else, nothing about the property. And to me, it seems like the seller's paying to market the agent.
There's one agent locally where the whole sign is his photo. The whole sign. There's nothing about the property. There's just the name of the agency, and the whole sign, and it's massive, is his photo.
Wow.
And if the owner's paying for a photo of the agent, I don't think that's what's going to attract the buyer, particularly if he's not good looking.
And Claire, I'll tell you that I sold a property and was asked by all of the agents who I interviewed to put up money up front, and I refused. I said, no, you're not having any money up front. The other thing that I did with my property as well is I said I didn't want to have a sign out the front because I was actually in a cul-de-sac where we didn't get any passing trade, and I knew that all that would happen is it would invite the neighbours to come and have a look at my property when it was open. So I didn't have home opens either. I crafted a careful campaign with that agent that was designed around creating some mystique around my property, and ended up getting the highest price that had ever been achieved in the street as a result of a carefully crafted campaign. More than one way to skin a cat. And when it was sold, the agent asked if he could put up a sign saying sold, and I said, you can, but you pay for it. And that was the only thing that I agreed to, and the agent did pay for that by way of getting that little bit of marketing for themselves. Well, it is time for us to take a 1-minute break, but there's more to come on the show. While we're gone, you can email any of your questions to pam@mypropertytv.com.au or tweet them to Margaret Lomas AU with the hashtag MyPropertyTV. If we don't get to them tonight, we'll answer them next week, and you will still win the ticket prize. Stay right there, and we will be back soon.
Nightclub king, yeah. Mama got shake for that and sauce, yeah. Looky here, lady, gotta know what I mean. Cause I brush the swagger like a pimp when I flip through that room like boom. Tell me what you gon' do. Okay, girl, I did this for you.
Thanks for staying with us for our last segment of Property Investing Matters. I'm Margaret Lomas, and we've been talking about whether now is the time to buy or sell in the Sydney market with Tony Abboud from Snowden Parks Real Estate. You can send your questions to us by emailing pam@mypropertytv.com.au, or you can pop them into a comment on our Facebook page. Let's get back to Tony now. And Tony, it was interesting when you talked about the prestige market in Sydney doing quite well still. The prestige market in Brisbane isn't going so well. And I guess the reason to explain that is that when we talk about prestige markets in Sydney, we're meaning, probably $2.5 to $20 million, and that's the price range. We have a very, very limited amount of buyers there, but most of those will be buyers who more than likely haven't been overly affected in their business by the COVID situation. COVID has very firmly hurt smaller businesses rather than bigger conglomerates and corporations. When we talk about the prestige market in Brisbane, we're talking anything from $1 million up. And there are many more people capable of moving into the $1 million up market than there are capable of moving into the $2.5 million up market. And many of those could be also people with businesses that have previously done pretty well, so they're moving out of their $600,000 and $700,000 homes into their $1 million homes, and suddenly their businesses have been impacted. And we're really seeing a struggle to that prestige market.
I think Sydney, the dynamics in Sydney is a little bit different. The eastern suburbs of Sydney and areas around the harbour, we like to think are quite unique around Australia. And there's a lot of international interest and a lot of corporations that are locally based, or there's a lot of CEOs from overseas corporations who are investing in Sydney. Interestingly, what we've found is the overseas market at the moment They see Australia as, compared to the rest of the world, they're seeing us as medically safe and economically safe. And that's attracting a lot of interest into Australia and particularly into Sydney from the big corporates and a lot of the big CEOs. And I think that's what's underpinning the prestige market in Sydney. Because across the world, we're actually performing very, very well. And that we're now an attractor to the overseas sector and money investment into Australia. And that's reflected in the sales in the prestige properties.
Tony, this is probably a question that you can't answer since nobody has ever actually worked or operated through a pandemic before unless you had a business back during the Spanish flu, in which case you're probably not in business any longer. But would you think that the situation in Victoria with the high cases and the fact that now their economy is severely impacted, will that change the strength of the property market there, or do you expect them to bounce back fairly quickly once they're all out of lockdown?
I think it's, we said earlier, you don't make a long-term decision based on a short-term situation. I expect that there'll be a massive bounce back. I think within a lot of the sectors and different industries and people that we're speaking to at government and in the corporate level, we're expecting a massive bounce back. We're expecting that the bounce back will be actually explosive. And if I can describe it to you this way, when I was at university studying economics, and we were taught if there was a stimulus package, there's normally a lag effect of 12, 18 months before that stimulus package kicks in. Now, we've just had probably the biggest stimulus package in our history, over $350 billion injected into the economy. Now, what's going to happen because of the digital world, the lag effect is no longer 12, 18 months. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. And when the impact of that stimulus package kicks in, I think it will be explosive. Because, Margaret, you made a comment earlier that a lot of people delayed their decisions, whether it be buying or selling. So there is a lot of pent-up demand. Even in areas where there is a bit of excess supply at the moment, we know new stock coming on the market in the new product is down 42%. Now, that's almost half what we were used to. So I think, or even though we can't see it at the moment, I think we're at the start of the new cycle that will last over the next 3 or 4 years. So I think we're a lot more resilient than the way we see things today and the way we feel today.
Tony, I've been in this business for 25 years now, not as long as you, I don't think, but certainly a long time. And I've noticed a really big change in buyer behaviour and buyer attitudes in terms of, you know, when I first began, there was always a fairly deep fear that most people had that they'd buy property, that it would crash and lose all its value and that they would be set way, way back. And I think a lot of that was based on lack of knowledge, lack of education. You know, when I wrote my first book on how to invest in property using true economic intelligence, no one had ever written anything like that before. Up until then, people were buying property even as an investment because they might have liked the look of the kitchen or felt that they'd lived there themselves. There was no real exploration into whether or not an area had what it took to perform for them. So people did have this deep fear that they'd buy property, it's a massive big asset. Interest rates were fairly high back then, so they'd lose a lot of money. I guess what's happened over the years is, first of all, we've seen so many crises of an economic nature just in that 25 years, from the global financial crisis through to share market crashes and all sorts of other things that have happened. We've had experts go on TV and bravely declare 40% crashes in Australia's property market. Overseas experts are fond of saying that. Even local experts have famously made claims that have never transpired. And we've also seen a big change to technology, which makes everything, as you say, happen faster. So it's almost like we've been a little desensitized to that fear that property is going to crash and be worth nothing. I think people know that there's that risk that they'll buy it and it might lose some money, but providing there are fundamentals, it'll come back. As you say, it's a long-term decision, not a short-term decision. And I just think that because of that change in attitude and that desensitisation that we've now had, I don't think people are fearful of buying property.
That's right. I don't think people are worried about the price of their property is going to crash. I think the thing that is really prominent in people's mind, can I buy this property and can I afford to pay it off because I've got a job? And I think that's a bigger consideration that rather than whether the price is going to go up or down. I don't think that's a factor in people's minds. And now there's a greater focus on the home because, as we've said earlier, people are now working from home. The home is not only a place from a social point of view, it serves a business function as well. And I don't think people think about real estate's going to crash because you're right. This is in 40 years in real estate, I've been through everything, but this is my first pandemic and I hope it's my last pandemic. And we've had prices go up and down, but certainly in the last 15, 20 years, we've not really had a crash. Even in the GFC, it was quite mild. Like here in Australia with the GFC, everybody got a check for $900. Interest rates went down, so it was easier to make your home repayments, and very few people lost their job. So here in Australia, the GFC was a great thing, and everyone said, give me another GFC. If I'm going to get $900, interest rates go down and I don't lose my job. So I think today it's more about the fact that you can make your repayments and it's a safe haven and it's yours to keep.
Absolutely. Definitely a big shift and a big change in the attitudes of people who want to buy property. Tony, we've got 3 questions to go. Let's get to them now. The first one comes from Clive and Sarah, and they say, hi Tony and Margaret, we are selling our house in the western suburbs of Sydney. Given the current climate, would we be better to auction or sell by private treaty? Very interesting.
Look, I've always been an advocate of private treaty over and above auction. And at the moment, particularly, you note the western suburbs, we said earlier that that's an area where there's a lot of good activity. If you look at it, do a role reversal. Do buyers enjoy buying at auction or not? And I don't know very many buyers who love buying at auction. And if you've got a well-priced property and you've got a decent price on it, a good asking price, there's plenty of buyers who will buy it. It'll probably be cheaper for you to sell by private treaty because you don't have to pay auctioneers' costs and the like. The other thing is that once you put a property up to auction, if it doesn't sell at the auction and it becomes a for sale, well, then you're selling it by private treaty anyway. But it also has a problem with it then because it's stigmatized. It's a failed auction. And buyers at that point want to know, well, why didn't it sell? Is there something wrong with it? Did the owner want too much? And all that sort of thing. And that's not something that you really want to risk. The western suburbs, there's a lot of activity. You really can sell it by private treaty quite comfortably today without a need of an auction.
Clive and Sarah, I've never been a fan of auctions, both as a seller and as a buyer. I think they are a mistake for many people. And you are probably reading in the press all those fabulous figures about someone selling this house 100,000 over the reserve or this one 150 over the reserve. Here's what I say about that. First of all, it's one in hundreds. You don't hear about all of the ones that didn't make reserve or only just made reserve. Second thing I'll say about that is it's likely that that agent did a darn good job at conditioning those people to have a low reserve. And in doing so, the property probably sold at market value rather than 150,000 over reserve. People think when they hear that, that means that the property sold for $150,000 more than it was worth. But that is not the case because the reserve is set by the sellers by being influenced by the agent. And
That's
he
right.
is going to do everything he can to get them to set a low reserve so that he can A, sell the property, B, get a really good, advertisement for himself because he sold the property, and C, make sure that everything happens nice and quickly and look like they got a good price, when in fact, even that 150,000 over the reserve may still have been under market value. So to me, auctions are too dishonest to be using. I'd much rather find a really willing and able real estate agent who wants to talk to me about how we can craft a campaign that is different. Brainstorm ideas to get some kind of mystique around your sale so that rather than just be another listing that takes the usual route of going on to realestate.com and then sitting there for however long and you continually paying to have it brought back up to top of the list, let's talk about some way to sell our property that's a little bit different and a little bit out of the box. There's 1,000 ideas, and you know what, if I had more time in my life, I'd become a real estate agent and I'd show all those other real estate agents how to do that, because I think there's definitely a way to make all of that far better. Let's have a look at what Jason has to ask. And Jason says, hello, will the Sunshine Coast Light Rail have any real impact on that area? Also, Sydney buy or wait? Tony, I think what we need to point out here is that Sunshine Coast Light Rail isn't really going to be like a significant piece of rail infrastructure that all of a sudden moves work commuters to and from work very easily. To me, it almost seems to be more like a bit of a tourist attraction. And I know that it is going to, move about a few places, but I can't see that it's going to be a piece of infrastructure that's going to have a big impact on prices. What about you?
Oh, look, the only thing that I know about that area is that they're predicting the population to grow from 320 odd thousand to over 500,000 over the next 20 years. So there's going to be natural growth in that area. We've always said any piece of infrastructure is good, but I agree with you, it's not something that is dominant in that area that would be the one trigger that would determine prices.
And Jason, while I don't think that the light rail is going to be something that impacts prices, that doesn't mean I don't think Sunshine Coast is a good place to buy. What we're seeing happening is those northern suburbs of Brisbane up through the university at Petrie and a little bit beyond is now starting to become very well populated, and we're starting to see proper transport infrastructure really being developed really well up into there. So train lines that go all the way up now into Rothwell, and it's going to go into Petrie as well. As we see that happen, it becomes more populous, it becomes more expensive to live in those northern suburbs. We see the creep, and it's going to join up into the Sunshine Coast relatively soon. We can now start thinking about the Sunshine Coast more like a Central Coast to Sydney, a Geelong to Melbourne, even though it is a little bit further up than both of those things. But over time, we are going to see a big change, and they're going to start to have more of their own microeconomy rather than remain just a tourist destination. So we're already seeing health infrastructure being built there significantly with the big medical centre at Kawana. We're seeing a lot of things going in there that means that people can live there but not need Brisbane as their central point. They don't need to go back to Brisbane for things. Just like here on the Central Coast, we don't need to go to Sydney for anything. We have our own local economy. We have 400,000 people, and we don't need Sydney for things anymore, and therefore we have our own property market. I think you're going to see the same thing happening with the Sunshine Coast. Don't expect a boom anytime soon, but definitely in the coming 5 years, some good opportunities to buy property there if you've got the time to sit and wait for it to grow from there. And our last question comes from Ruby. And Ruby says, hi Margaret, I was looking for Marrickville but was priced out. Were there any other suburbs not as expensive that have the potential to do well for the next 5 to 10 years? And I guess, Tony, she's really thinking somewhere around those inner western suburbs.
Yes. Well, we said earlier Marrickville was one of those suburbs that in the last 6 months has actually performed quite well, and the prices in Marrickville have actually come up a little bit. And all the suburbs around that, Dulwich Hill, Stanmore, all of those areas, right back to Leichhardt and over across to Earlwood, those areas are very highly sought after. So when you ask, is there any other suburb that we know that the prices are going to go up in the next 5 to 10 years? The first thing we need to acknowledge is that those prices of those suburbs rather are very tightly held and are doing quite well at the moment. And stage one is to be able to get in before you can capitalise on any growth. They're probably not suburbs. If your objective is substantial price growth, then you may have to look outside of that precinct of that Marigold, Dulwich Hill, Lewisham, Stanmore, Hurlston Park, all those sorts of areas, because they're quite high up and doing very well at the moment. I find that question is quite general because are you buying this property purely for growth? Because if you want substantial growth in the next 5 to 10 years, as you would know, Margaret, there's probably some other suburbs that may qualify better than that in a city, in a west area.
Absolutely. Really important, Ruby, to point out for you that if you're looking to buy an owner-occupied property, then you're planning to live there and the reliance on growth is then reduced and you're buying for lifestyle and you are going to be looking for a property in a price range you can afford that satisfies your lifestyle needs to the best capacity you can. If you're going to buy to invest, then you probably wouldn't be buying in Marrickville because there are plenty of suburbs even outside of the state that will have a better growth performance in the next 5 to 10 years than Marrickville will. It could be a cheaper suburb, but we talk about percentage growth and there's plenty of suburbs that I could tell you, I could send you a big list of suburbs that are going to do better from a growth perspective if you're going to be investing. Of course, the other thing about Marrickville, if you're an investor, is for the price you pay, the return is very low, even if rents are good. And so you're finding that what you're getting back as a rent return is there's a shortfall between what you've got to pay on outgoings for your mortgage and for all of your rates and your expenses. And if you're topping that up, not only does the area have to grow really well, but it's got to grow exceptionally well to make it worthwhile you putting that money in. So if you're looking for lifestyle, then if you look at Marrickville and go out to Parramatta and exclude Parramatta and exclude Marrickville, and then come in as far from Parramatta toward Marrickville as you can afford, you're going to start to see what we call those ripple suburbs. If you're finding you're priced out of Marrickville, there are a lot of other people who have been priced out of Marrickville as well, and those people will start to ripple out and look at the surrounding suburbs that they can afford, and they will become popular over time. Make sure there's the infrastructure there, but as I said, if it's owner-occupier, growth is the second thing you're looking for, and ability to meet your lifestyle is the very first and utmost thing that you're looking for as an owner-occupier. Well, that's all that we have for you this week. We will be back again next week, and joining me then is Michael Tees, tackling all of those pesky strata issues, and of course answering your strata questions. So be sure to get them to me through the week, ready for the show. Between now and the next show, you can keep sending your emailed questions to pim@mypropertytv.com.au or just pop them in a comment on my Facebook page or go to the My Property TV Facebook page and put them there. If your question was answered tonight, you're the lucky recipient of 2 webinar tickets valued at $20 each. Just email pim@mypropertytv.com.au. Tell me the question that you asked and we will email you all the login details. Thank you, Tony, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Margaret. It was good being with you today.
Always great to have you on board, and you can find Tony at Snowden Parks Real Estate in Sydney. If you're looking to get into contact with me, there's a number of ways that you can achieve that. I have all the usual social media options: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the email address pim@mypropertytv.com.au comes straight into my inbox. If you want to go to that webinar, just go along to my website, destiny.com.au, click on the link, and early birds who book before the 23rd of September will not only get a ticket to log in, but they will also get a free copy of the 20 must-ask questions for every property investor. That book's valued at $30, so it really makes your ticket worthwhile. And I know that you will have a great night with plenty of information without you even having to leave your home to get it. Our webinars are very professionally presented, I might add, just like our TV shows are. And so you're not going to sit there and see me at a desk with a little crummy laptop trying to give you a little bit of information, you will enjoy the webinar as if you are in the room with me. And if you're ready to buy your next property right now, but you just can't find the time that you need to do the research and be sure that you buy the right property for your circumstances, then make sure you give us a call, because Destiny Property Match is a revolutionary way to track down a property which matches your own circumstances. Give us a call on 1300 My Destiny or drop me a line via email to find out more. Have a great week, and I will see you back here next Tuesday night.
Property Investing Matters was brought to you by Destiny, empowering investors to achieve success through property investment for more than 24 years.
Are you a do-it-yourself investor who likes to have control over your own financial circumstances? You may not know this, but it's a fact that most failed property investments happen because the investor didn't have the skills or knowledge to pick a good property. Don't let this happen to you. By undertaking our comprehensive, online and fully interactive property investor education course, you'll get all the knowledge that you need without leaving home. There's simply no other course which offers so much, and you'll emerge a fully fledged and confident investor, ready to tackle head-on your next investment property purchase. Don't join the thousands of property investors with dud properties. Get educated now and take your financial future into your own hands. Destiny, empowering you to buy the right investment property.
Go to destiny.com.au to find out more, or give us a call on 1300 My Destiny.
We can